my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am saved. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is the cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
All right, so have you ever noticed, I'm going to start with a joke that I stole from some comic strip I found on Instagram. Have you ever noticed how vastly different it is to make friends when you're an adult as opposed to when you're a kid? Nobody? Like, yeah, here we go. There we go. Someone agrees with that. Like, you know, you're sitting in the office. Do people sit or hover around the water cooler? I don't know. We have a water fountain at the gym. But you're visiting with your coworkers. Maybe you're having lunch together, and you're just like, are these people my best friends? Or are they just coworkers? Like, does this person who I have lunch with every day actually like me? Or are they tolerating me because they're paid to be here? I have no friends. Everybody hates me. That's what it's like making friends as an adult. When you're a kid, it's a little bit different. It maybe went something like this for you. Hi. Hey. I'm Matt. David. Want to be best friends? Sure. Friendship sealed forever. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic. Comes a little bit easier when you're a kid, is all I'm saying. So having true, real friendships, it comes differently. And we've been going through this year of treasure hunting. And can you believe it? The snow is on the ground. It is almost the end of our year of treasure hunting. We are getting close to the start of the Advent season, which will carry us to Christmas. So we've got just a few weeks left to consider, as we've been doing, almost, with the exception of summer, since January, what does it mean to store up treasure in heaven? So recently, if you've been around, or they're available on YouTube if this just sounds so fascinating and you missed it and you want to catch up. But Pastor Kevin's been talking about how if you hear the word treasure and the only thing you think about is money, you're missing something. Because there are other treasures in our lives that we can store up. Other heavenly treasures that will have an impact that can last forever. And one word that we've been saying often these last couple of weeks is this word of steward. How can we be a good steward with what God has given us? And so today what we're going to do is we're going to consider the relationships, the friendships, the connections that we have with other people. Because those relationships, those friendships, those connections are a blessing. They are a treasure that God gives to us. And so the question would be, how do we steward that treasure well? I mean, if we want to think about it maybe in more financial terms, since we often want our treasure to be money, how could we invest in our relationships, in our friendships? How do we make investments that maybe doesn't just impact a few years here, but could actually impact everlasting life for all of eternity? So today, with just the abundant wealth of relational advice we could draw from the Jewish and Christian scriptures, I just want to focus in on one story of what it could look like if we wanted to steward our relationships, our friendships well. And this is the story of Jonathan and David. Now, if you're not familiar with those stories, you might be familiar, you're not familiar with those names. You might be just familiar with the name of David. David's an early Jewish figure who is quite famous. You probably, maybe, at least know the story about David fighting Goliath. You might know him as the most famous king of Israel. And maybe some of you already know the name Jonathan and who this guy is, but if you don't, Jonathan was the son of a guy named Saul. The same Saul who also went by King Saul. So King Saul is the first king of Israel who precedes David on the throne. Jonathan is the oldest son of King Saul. He is the heir to Saul's throne. Yet, we know, because I just said it, David is the one who's going to be next on the throne of Israel, and we'll get to more on that later. So in spite of the fact that that sentence alone, Jonathan's the heir to the throne, David's going to get the throne, we know. In spite of the fact that those sentences should mean that there's just division and competition and conflict between David and Jonathan, actually the story is they're just friends. David and Jonathan are an excellent example of what does it mean to steward our friendships and relationships well, because they show an incredible picture of what true friendship actually looks like. So let's set the stage a little bit in their story. So if you know the famous story of David and Goliath, that is found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. You don't have to turn there, but I'm just going to make mention of something else. So the chapter most or maybe all of us know about, David and Goliath, is 1 Samuel 17. But if you were reading your Bibles, which you should be doing, and you were just to turn back a few pages you would find the 14th chapter of 1 Samuel, 3 chapters ahead. And this is a story all about Jonathan. It's a story of the king, his father, and the army of Israel. They're too afraid to engage and fight and battle the Philistine army. So Jonathan convinces just the one guy who carries his armor, hey, it seems like my dad's not going to do anything about this army. What if just the two of us go and try to beat all of them? And that's exactly what they do. The two guys defeat an army. It's an amazing story of bravery and faith. And then we get to those 3 chapters later, and we read about David beating Goliath, who's also a Philistine. And then David and Jonathan meet. And here's what we're told. If you want to go to the end of 1 Samuel 17, this has been the story of David and Goliath. And then, because we put all these verse and chapter divisions in there, let's pretend they're not there. Let's just start in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 57. And we're going to read all the way to 18, verse 4. And just see how this just flows. So 1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 57. And when you see that big number 18 that says you should stop reading, don't listen to it. Don't stop reading. We're going to keep going. After David killed Goliath, he returned to the camp. Then Abner brought him to Saul. David was still carrying Goliath's head. "Young man, whose son are you?" Saul asked him. David said, "I'm the son of Jesse from Bethlehem." David finished talking with Saul. After that, Jonathan and David became close friends. It's like the kid. Like, hey, want to be friends? Sure. Like, after that, Jonathan and David became close friends. Then it says this, Jonathan loved David just as he loved himself. From that time on, Saul kept David with him. He didn't let him return home to his family. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him just as he loved himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David. He gave him his military clothes. He gave him his sword, his bow, and his belt. So David, whom is at least a little bit younger at this point, because he wasn't a soldier in the army when he goes and beats Goliath. Jonathan is a little bit older, because he was a soldier already. These two conquering heroes meet, and they just immediately hit it off. And in the story of their friendship, for the rest of our time this morning, we're just going to consider 4 things that maybe we can learn from for ourselves as we wonder, how can we be people who steward and invest in our relationships and friendships well? So the first thing we need to consider is that true friendship is a strong bond. And that might seem really super obvious, but I do think it needs to be said, especially in today's world, right? Like, consider those words we just read. That's what all we know about how they met. After that, which is after David talks to Saul, Jonathan's dad, after that, Jonathan and David become close friends. Some translations say their souls or lives are tied and bound together. We don't know how it happened. We don't know if they had a lot in common besides their acts of bravery and faith that they've just done in the last few pages. We just know that they became close friends. In fact, there's a word used there, you might have caught it. We're told they made a covenant of their friendship. This is a word, it's often used in the scriptures, and it means an agreement or a contract. And what this means is that when things get a little rocky between David and Jonathan, and they're going to, we're going to talk about that, but their friendship can't just be easily broken or discarded. When things get tough, when someone says something the other person doesn't want to hear, they're not just going to block each other on Facebook and move on with their lives and pretend they don't exist. At least 3 different times that we know about, they make a covenant in their friendship. And this is the problem that maybe some of us have when it comes to stewarding our relationships with others well. We don't actually build and nurture and develop friendships to become strong bonds with other people. We keep people at arm's length. We chat with them on Facebook, but never in person. We only surround ourselves with people who say what we want to hear, and the second you say something I disagree with, I'm done with you. And we just keep things at an acquaintance level. You know, as easy as kids can make friends, maybe you also have a story of when you were a kid and you lost a friend just as quickly. That one fight, that one disagreement, that one recess where you wanted to play Foursquare and they wanted to play on the jungle gym, and now the friendship is over forever. That's not true friendship. True friendship lasts. True friendship survives. It's a strong bond. You may not go around using words like covenant to describe your friendship with someone else, but you should have someone or maybe several people who you have that strong, close connection with, who you really care about, who you can actually disagree with, who you can be vulnerable and honest and open with, and you know that if you say something they don't like, they're not just going to write you off forever. You can actually open up to them. So true friendship is a strong bond. The second thing we can learn about Jonathan and David, about how to steward and invest in our friendships, is that friendship makes us better. Friendship makes us better. C.S. Lewis, he writes this. The next few words are going to grab somebody's attention, I think. C.S. Lewis writes, friendship is unnecessary. Like philosophy, like art. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of the things that give value to survival. So think about that for just a moment. Friendship is unnecessary. It isn't what we need to survive, especially if your worldview says survival of the fittest. Because friendship, true friendship that's a strong bond, makes you vulnerable. But without true friendship, there's not much value in surviving at all. Like, you can live without friends. You can live without stewarding and investing in your relationships well, but the life you find yourself living may not actually be one you want to enjoy, you actually enjoy living. It may not be one you want to live. So David and Jonathan are friends. Again, according to the way 1 Samuel 18 says it, they kind of just hit it off immediately. So that's David and Jonathan. Now, David and Saul, Jonathan's dad, that's another story. They don't hit it off. Saul is jealous of David. Saul quickly begins to resent and hate him. And he has very, very quickly had enough of the young giant slayer that helped save his nation. The beginning of chapter 19, Saul tells his attendants, and he tells Jonathan, so this is a chapter later, I need you guys to go kill David. But again, we're told Jonathan liked David very much, so he warns him of his father's plans. Jonathan even comes up with a plan. Hey, David, don't panic. I'm going to go talk some sense into my father. I'm going to go see if I can keep you safe or if you need to run for your life. And this kind of goes back and forth for a little bit, where he talks some sense into King Saul. He talks some sense into his dad. David's safe for a bit. Then Saul loses his temper again. David's got to go on the run. And there's just this crazy, chaotic circle that happens for a few chapters. And Jonathan and David are trying to maintain their relationship, maintain their friendship, even as Jonathan's father is trying to kill David. But there's an important verse I want to make mention of. It's found in 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 16. If you want to open that up, we are going to come back to it later, so you can leave it open. 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 16. So David's hiding from King Saul, and then we read, Jonathan went to find David and encouraged him to stay strong in his faith in God. In the midst of the hiding, in the midst of the running, in the midst of the chaos that life's throwing at both of them, Jonathan helps David find his strength in God. Jonathan encourages David in his faith. Jonathan's father is trying to kill David. David is understandably not doing so great as a result of this. And Jonathan lifts David up, and he's a life-giving voice and a life-giving presence in David's life. Some of you who know the story of King David might know that David is later going to be called a man after God's own heart. But based on this verse, you could question whether or not David would have been able to become that, the man after God's own heart, had it not been for Jonathan's friendship and encouragement during the difficult seasons of his life. Because that's what good friends do. They make you better. And they make you better by drawing you closer to God. If you spend most of your time with people who pull you further away from Jesus, where do you think you're going to be? Next week, next month, next year? You're probably going to be further away from Jesus. But you spend your time, you give your heart to the relationships that speak the life of Jesus into you. Where are you going to be? Next week, next month, next year. You're probably going to be closer to Jesus. And of course, I shouldn't need to say it, but I will anyway. We need relationships with people regardless of religion or belief or lack of belief. We need friendships and relationships with people of all different backgrounds. But if you're here today and you would call yourself a follower of Jesus, then I would simply encourage you, make sure the voices that are loudest in your ears, make sure the truest friends in your life, not all the friends in your life, but the truest friends in your life are the ones who have surrendered themselves to the one who created all that is true. Because true friendship makes us better. The third thing we can learn from David and Jonathan about how to steward and invest in our friendships and relationships is that true friends are willing to sacrifice for one another. True friends are willing to sacrifice for another. So again, go back to that chapter if you already have it, 1 Samuel 23. Jonathan encourages David to find his faith in God, and then we're told this. So I'll read a little bit here, starting in verse 16, going to 18. Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh. He told David that God would make him strong. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul won't harm you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be next in command. Even my father Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant of friendship in front of the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. Do you notice that? Jonathan recognizes, David, we all know you're going to be king. Not me. And again, remember, Jonathan is actually Prince Jonathan, the oldest son of King Saul. He's the rightful heir to the throne, and he steps aside. He submits what would be better for him, clearly better for him, and he submits that to what he sees as being God's will, and he seems very okay with it, knowing that it's what's best for his friend. I came across a quote that said, David often gets recognition for his heart for God, but Jonathan clearly had a depth of spiritual insight and discernment worth mentioning and remembering. True friends sacrifice for one another. They don't only think about what would be best for themselves, but rather they think what would be best for their friend. And in fact, from what we can see in the Jewish scriptures, this is believed to have been the last time David and Jonathan see each other. Jonathan dies not too long after this, which means David's final memory of his friend is Jonathan stepping aside, renouncing his right, his birthright to the throne, and putting his friend David first. Like, I wish I had a story I could say, like, let me tell you of a time I've made a sacrifice that significant to a friend. Like, I don't think I've ever come close to doing something that significant for someone else. Where, like, I'm a good guy. Like, I want to help people. As long as it's not going to cost me too much, right? Like I want to be a good friend. Zach, we're coworkers. I know you only tolerate me because you're paid to be there, but I want to be a good friend, but only when it's convenient and easy for me. That's not true friendship. True friendship sacrifices for one another. The final thing we learn from David and Jonathan is that stewarding your relationships well, investing in your friendships well, is a two-way street. In order for this to really take off, in order for this to really work the way it's supposed to work, you need both people, both friends doing their part. You've maybe been in a friendship like this before, where it felt like you were doing all the work. You were sending all the invites to get together. You were initiating all the communication. Maybe that friendship didn't go that far. Now, in all that we've looked at, in all that we've covered so far, David and Jonathan kind of appear to have a similar one-sided friendship. We're told how much Jonathan loved David. We're told how Jonathan encouraged David. Jonathan protected David. Jonathan sacrificed for David. It's kind of a little codependent, isn't it? But it's not the whole story. Because in the end, Jonathan dies, and David becomes king. But when Saul and Jonathan are killed, everyone connected to Saul, everyone related to him, just panics. Because obviously David, who's being hunted by Saul, and now he's king, he's going to want his revenge on the guy who sent him into hiding. Since Saul's dead, who's he going to take it out on? And some of Saul's family and allies, they do actually fight against David. They war against David. But Jonathan has a son named Mephibosheth. I'm going to try to not stutter over that too many times. Mephibosheth. There's a good name for any, if you're watching, and there's this story that Chantel was at a conference and a lady just said, she's introducing her family and she says the name Avriel. The week later, honey, she can correct me later, we found out we were expecting, and it was like, I love that name. So someone right now, you're going to be like, what do we name our baby? In like a month, whenever, you're going to find out you're expecting Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth. So Jonathan has a son named Mephibosheth. He's 5 years old when his father Jonathan dies. And the nurse caring for him, she hears Saul and Jonathan are dead. She hears David's king. She assumes this child, this 5-year-old, is in danger. She picks him up and she starts running. And she's so panicked, she's so terrified, she trips, she falls, and Mephibosheth is injured, and now he can't walk. But he hides. He hides because he believes that's what he has to do to stay safe. Yet once David establishes his reign over Israel, he starts to ask around, have any of Saul's descendants survived? Because of my relationship with Jonathan, I need to be kind to someone in his family. And so David tracks down Mephibosheth. And by this time, we don't have an exact time frame, but one estimate I found would say, after David, he wars against the people who fight against his rule, he brings the ark to Jerusalem, he has to do a few things beforehand. Perhaps 15 years have passed. And Mephibosheth is maybe 20 years old by the time David actually tracks him down. So this guy has been hiding out since he was 5 till he's 20, fearing for his life, that if the king ever finds me, I'm a dead man. And David finally does find him, and he cares for him. We're told David treats him as though he's his own son. He provides for Mephibosheth everything that he needs. There's a really nice song. Pastor Kevin actually mentioned it to me a little while ago, before I even knew I was preaching this sermon, and it's called Carried to the Table. And it draws these beautiful parallels between Mephibosheth being welcomed by David and us being welcomed by Jesus. And I'm going to post it on the Remind group and on our Facebook group after the service so that you can hear it. But the point here is that friendship is a two-way street. True friendship isn't staying in a relationship when you're being taken advantage of. And true friendship isn't you going out of your way to find the people who can do the most for you. It's a two-way street where you both have a strong bond with one another. You both make each other better. You both sacrifice for one another. It's a two-way street. But here is the tricky thing. Because depending on where you find yourself today, depending on the friendships, the relationships, how you've been stewarding and investing in them up to today, you might have to be at a place where someone needs to go first. Someone has to be the first to show kindness. Someone has to be first to serve the other friend. Someone has to go first in initiating something that takes it beyond that little Facebook friend acquaintance level. And so here is my final challenge as we wrap our morning up. Are you willing to go first this week? Are you willing to be kind first? Are you willing to serve first? Are you willing to put someone else first? First. Are you willing to take a chance and initiate something that could lead to an incredible friendship and relationship that would impact both of your lives, not only here, but for all of eternity? Because the God who created you was willing to initiate and go first with his relationship with you. And he calls you to do the same, to show love to the people around you. Let's get beyond the superficial, stereotypical friendships that exist in our culture today that are nothing more than surface-level acquaintances. Let's forge real relationships with others. And then let's steward and invest in those relationships well. Because when we do that, we will store up for ourselves treasure in heaven based on how we treat each other right now. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we are brought into a relationship with you. We are carried into our friendship relationship with you simply because you initiated it first. Because you called us, because you loved us, because you welcome us and invite us. God, and then from that relationship, out of the overflow of your goodness in our lives, you tell us to do the same for others. To welcome, to invite, to initiate that friendship, that relationship that could become a strong bond, that could make each other better, that could sacrifice and serve each other and be a two-way street. So God, there may be people here or people watching online who there's a face in their mind. Maybe right now, or maybe it's going to come later this week. They're going to, all of a sudden, an old friend, a current friend, someone's going to pop into their head. God, would you help us to be people who develop, steward, and invest in our friendships well? God, if we need to go first because these are not friendships we've been investing in, these aren't connections we already have, if we need to go first because we don't have anybody who we have a strong bond with and they sacrifice for us, we sacrifice for them, we're just not there yet, God, help us to be willing to take that gigantic, vulnerable risk, and it is, but that we'd be willing to go first. That we'd look for someone we care about and we'd see a need and we put them first. God, help us. God, your word says that the world will see that we're following you based on how well we love one another. And followers of Jesus have done a pretty poor job sometimes of loving one another. So God, when we disagree, when we have different opinions, different beliefs, different priorities, different lifestyles, God, may we never stop loving one another in a way that the world can notice. And may many people come to follow you, come to know you, come to surrender their lives to you because they see us loving each other well. So God, thank you for the treasure of friendships and relationships. Thank you for the blessing that they are in our lives, for the fact that even though we could survive, we could physically live without them, we don't want to, because they are what make our life here worth living. Help us to store up these kind of treasures in heaven based on how we live today. In Jesus' name, amen.